Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Woldt, the host of the Coffee People and the Coffee Smarter podcasts. Thanks for checking in with us here. These shows are presented to you with help from Roastar Coffee Packaging. They're a coffee packaging company that enables small businesses to share their big stories. And they just make cool stuff. So if you're out there and you're looking for a new tin can or a flat bottom gusseted bag, which is a thing I know about now, a stand-up pouch to fit your coffee beans, you want a package that matches the quality of what you're putting in them, right? Check them out at roastar.com. You can bring your own design. You can develop something new with the help of one of their recommended designers. You can even create something with the help of their AI-powered design lab, which is on roastar.com. You'll find that they're more than a packaging company. They can be a partner that enables you to tell your big stories, the same way that they've enabled us to share the stories of coffee people. So check them out at roastar.com. Thanks for listening, and now it's time for the show. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. This show is presented by Roastar Coffee Packaging, found online at roastar.com. They've been a great source of support, helping enable us to tell the stories of people in the coffee industry, and we really appreciate that. You can also go to roastwestcoast.com to find recaps of this show, our Coffee Smarter podcast, so much other coffee content. And if you haven't poured yourself a cup of coffee, like I have, now is the time to get started. Our guest today is Chuck Patton, the founder and head roaster of Chuck's Roasts. He's also the human being behind Patton Coffee Consulting and was the original founder of the iconic Bird Rock Coffee Roasters. You can find him online at chuckroastscoffee.com. Of course, those links will be in all of our show notes wherever you're listening. Mr. Patton, welcome to our podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I should memorize all that. I've said it like 300 times, but it just seems like a lot of work. I mentioned that at the top there that you got started, or at least I know of your start as Bird Rock Coffee, but I'm wondering if before that even, what got you into coffee in the first place? Was there a moment or a memory that you thought, man, this is interesting?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And then I guess my earliest memory of coffee, I grew up here in San Diego, actually very close to where we live now in Bird Rock. And I think my earliest memory of coffee, my parents would entertain quite a bit, have friends over all the time. And every time they had company, I would go with my mom and we'd go over to a place called the Panican, which was really known as one of the first coffee houses, not just in Southern California, but definitely in San Diego. And
Sure.
kind of an iconic place. But across the street from the Panican, they had a store. They would sell coffee equipment and, of course, roasted coffee and bulk tea, that kind of thing. And I will never forget the smell of walking into that powerful roasted coffee smell when you go into a store that has bins of roasted coffee. And my mom would buy some coffee there and then go home, and after dinner she would brew that coffee in a Chemex. And this was probably mid 70s, late 70s. And I can distinctly remember, I was too young to drink the coffee, but I just remembered loving the smell. She would grind it up on one of those little home grinders at the time. They were it was kind of like a spice mill basically. But it was the smell and just watching the process and the ritual of that always fascinated me, especially because what they drank was Yuban in a can with a Mr. Coffee, 7 days a week. And so this was kind of a special event. And certainly the smell was nothing, the smell of that fresh roasted coffee was nothing like the smell of the Yuban. And so I guess that would be my first real kind of memory of coffee and how special coffee can be, and how people use coffee and the ritual of coffee, and that comes all wrapped up into that event. And then kind of got into drinking coffee, and as I got older, of course, in high school, it was more about getting the buzz, the caffeine buzz, and having that before going to school, meeting some friends for breakfast or something, and seeing how much coffee we could drink, and getting the shakes during that first period class. And then I think probably was kind of starting to get into coffee in college, and certainly right after college, my wife and I moved to Japan for a year, and I was seeing things in Japan that I hadn't seen here. Their coffee culture was far different than at least what was going on in San Diego at the time. And this must have been mid '90s, '93. And a lot of the cafes there used the siphon or the vacuum brewing, and they were all into brewing by the cup. And I thought that was fascinating. And the flavor, blew me away a lot of the times there. And then when we moved back, we actually ended up in San Francisco, and that had a little bit more of a coffee culture going on than Southern California at the time.
So
But
many of the so
what?
many of the sorry, I was going to say so many of the stories I hear from people, their first coffee memories involve a grandmother usually,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that's such an interesting way to connect. I have these tin enamel coffee mugs that my grandmother had in her house, and I still
Those are
have
awesome.
the cast iron grinder that was mounted on the wall of the kitchen at the farm.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
I've
And
used it.
where was it?
It
Where
it
was that?
doesn't work well.
Oh,
That was in central Wisconsin.
oh, right
Uh,
on. Sure.
that grinder is kind of like taking two cast iron pans and just smashing them together. There's not much delicate balance there.
Well, I think
Uh,
that's how powerful coffee is. I mean, we we kind of take it for granted, but there are so many moments over coffee, or like I said earlier, the ritual of coffee that you're exposed to as a young kid that just stay with you, or can stay with you, and have that power um, to make you think about coffee as something different from just a commodity, and something different from a way just to make it through work or make it to
sure.
school.
So you come back from Japan. Japan's coffee culture is always seemingly a step or two ahead of
Yeah,
everyone else.
and like I said, I had never seen anyone even attempt to do coffee by the cup before, and that's kind of was an interesting concept. And then it was San Francisco, and I was more, San Francisco had some independent cafes, but it was certainly wasn't third wave coffee level. Um, when we moved back down to San Diego, then it was kind of starting to get into the espresso thing, getting an espresso maker, getting an espresso, and then in about 97 or 98, my wife got me a home roaster, and that's really when I started to experiment with, obviously roasting, but really appreciating the differences between the different origins and varietals. I mean, before that, it was either Starbucks or Pete's, and even though those two companies would sell a Sumatran coffee or a Colombian coffee based on their level of roast, it was often not a huge palatable
You could-
difference between between their
sure.
offerings. So that was pretty cool. Getting all the beans I got all the beans from Sweet Maria's, and yeah, that was really the start of it. I was still teaching at the time, but that
Well, I
was
was going to ask that you must have had another career. You're teaching. What made you decide that you wanted to take the step from hobbyist to I think I could make some money doing this, and then I actually want to do this every day
well, part of
in a
it.
cafe.
I was an adjunct at Grossmont College, City College, National University. I think I was also doing a gig at an ESL school at the time. So I mean, part of it was a profession, and I worked more than full time, but I didn't have a tenure track job, and so and it's kind of known as a freeway flyer. I would drive out to Grossmont in the morning, and then downtown in the afternoon, and National City in the evening. And that was just a grind, and I was kind of really enjoying the coffee thing. And then what I started to do both at the same time. The La Jolla Farmers Market. I got a booth in the La Jolla's Farmers Market, so I would roast, maybe Thursday or Friday night out of my garage, and then I would sell that coffee on Sunday morning at the La Jolla Farmers Market, while still teaching full time Monday through Friday.
Sure, you had a side hustle before the rest of us.
Yeah, I think that was good. And then as that started to get a little bit more popular, my wife had a really stable job at the time, and she was we had good insurance, and so I was able to kind of make that leap, because you can only do that side hustle for so long, and then you have to either forget about it or go for it. And so luckily I was afforded opportunity to go for it, and then we evolved into having the cafe in Bird Rock, and then the rest is history, I guess.
And I don't want to spend this whole show talking about Bird Rock. We easily could. There was a lot of history there, and I kind of think of Bird Rock as I'm looking around San Diego's coffee scene now. It's like the coaching tree in football. So many people that have their own coffee shops or their own roasteries now got their start there, or learned there, or and moved on, and that's a legacy that just continues to expand and expand. I'd also like to take a moment to toast to your wife and to my wife, who also has good insurance, enables me to do what I am doing, at least right now.
Absolutely.
Uh, how long was Bird Rock running as a roaster under you and your family?
Well, I founded it in 2002, and at the time, I didn't really have a location. Like I said early on, I was just roasting out of my garage, and then that was technically illegal. I had You had to use a commissary to do any food prep, and so the VFW, there's a VFW on Turquoise, and they allowed me to roast in there once I started to get a little more volume. And then I think I'm going to say around 2003 or four, I actually purchased a company called Destinations, and we did it with a home equity line of credit. And it was a guy who was operating in La Jolla, and it was just a wholesale business that he had out in Miramar. And around that time, I needed to buy a bigger roaster. I think I was using a Dietrich IR3 and operating out of a kiosk on Turquoise, but I really needed to step it up because I was starting to get some wholesale accounts. And so we bought his company and his book of sales and the roaster, and that was out in Miramar. And then we moved everything in 2006 to the Bird Rock location. And then we opened the roasting facility on Linda Rosa, I think in around 2014 or 15. And then shortly after that, the Little Italy location. And then we sold in 2016. So 2002 to 2016.
That coincides with my arrival here. I mean, the news that you were selling was big news to the people that I was in hospitality, and I had met a few people, and I lived in that area just south of Bird Rock Coffee's original location there, that cafe location. And so it was certainly something people were talking about, and it was kind of a precursor to a bunch of brewery sales that were about to happen in our marketplace. What was the impetus? You're running a business from the outside. People are going, "Oh, this is cool, and it must be a lot of fun," and doing this. Why sell? You ended up selling to Jeff Taylor of PT's Coffee.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a difficult question to answer, and I'm trying to figure out a good way to answer this. I think really in a nutshell, we never figured out how to run the company, how the company would run without us. And so I think some owners are really good at say pros and cons to it, but some owners are really good at being able to step back and saying, "Hey, this is your manager's responsibility. You deal with it. I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks or whatever." And we were never able to really figure out how to do that. So it was really a 7-day week operation. And when you get up to about 50 employees and multiple locations, you're pretty much dealing with something every couple of weeks, either an employee issue, or you're dealing with an equipment issue, or a customer issue, obviously. And it just begins to wear on you after a while. And it was basically, we were just overworked and starting to get a bit burnt out. And then, so I think there was actually one Sunday in particular. We decided to not work on a Sunday. It was crazy, right? So we decided to take our bikes and go around the bay. And I remember we were halfway around the bay, and I get a call from Bird Rock saying some plumbing issue that they couldn't figure out what the problem was, because I put the plumbing issue in, so I knew exactly what the problem was. So of course I had to turn the bike around and ride up there. And on the way, I'm just saying, this isn't really a quality of. I mean, the quality of life that we're living isn't really what we should be enjoying. So it was really about that. It was really about, maybe in hindsight, if we had figured out a better way to take time to step back and do some, self-care or more vacations, or recharge, so to speak, we maybe would still own the company, but we didn't. Now that can be thought of as kind of a negative, but the positive was, I visited every location every day, and I was constantly involved in the quality control, and I was constantly involved. Obviously, Heather and Tony were our roasters, and then Nick and Heather. But I was still had a hand in the roasting, and so I was still intimately involved in the business. And I think that the plus side of that is as far as a quality and from a customer's perspective. I mean, there was, I think, very rarely a quality issue on the customer's part, and that was primarily because I was so involved as an owner and making sure the place was clean and making sure, helping out when I needed to help out. So always kind of available. So that's kind of the flip side of being kind of a more of a hands-on owner.
Yeah, I mean, nobody will ever see it the way that you see it. It's yours.
Hmm.
It's
Right.
I always tried to treat places I worked at like that, but even then, there's a step between me and whoever was the owner or whoever was the thing, because I could only see so much because I didn't have maybe all the context of every location or whatever it
Right.
might be. Um,
Well, plus you want your employees to understand that the owner is invested and involved and there. I never wanted to give the idea that the employees were working for a manager. I
sure.
mean, obviously there was a manager in charge or a shift lead in charge, but everyone I think needs to understand that, okay, the owner has a vested interest in this. The owner is actually coming into work. The owner's is
Yeah,
actually dealing with some stuff. So I think that's important.
I
And
think
that
most
actually came from Martin Dietrich. I got to give Martin all the credit in the world of that. Before we opened, I went up and sat with Martin. And for those of you who don't know, Martin Dietrich was part of the Dietrich Coffee brand that was pretty ubiquitous in Southern California, and of course, Dietrich Roasters is the same family. And he just gave me that piece of advice. He said, "You never want to expand to the point where you can't visit every location every day." And that was how he designed Keen Coffee, which is what his company is now. And I kind of took that to heart, and it made a lot of sense to me.
I never wanted anyone to think that I wouldn't do what I was asking them to do.
Mhm.
And I think most of my employees always just felt bad for me. And so they would always step up to do more because they saw how tired I was all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, so you sell, and all of a sudden you have this kind of clean slate. What are you doing with yourself? And now it's been how many years you've decided to come back? How did that all transpire?
Yeah, well, I wasn't exact. Well, I worked for Jeff as a coffee buyer and kind of helped make that transition for our growing partners for about a year or so, and then I went back to teaching at USD. In this case, I taught for about a year at USD, and I think I didn't want anything to do with coffee for a while. Um, but as I was teaching, and I also was teaching at uh, an ESL school, and then up at NAM, which is the National Association of Music Merchants. They have a headquarters up in Carlsbad, and I was working with their museum up there. But kind of gradually, I kind of got back into thinking about coffee, and if I was going to get back into coffee, and how would I do it, and what would I not do, and what would I do better, and really what it came down to in a nutshell was trying to set something up that was more education based and high, super high end quality coffee. On the education part, I I loved my part of my favorite things about having Bird Rock Coffee was educating the customers about either how coffee is bought and sold. And I did a weekly free cupping every Friday in Bird Rock for well over 10 years, and that was just an awesome opportunity for me to explain, what exactly is coffee buying and how do people do it. And I want to continue to do that. And then the act of teaching people how to roast, and then also helping other people coming up in the coffee business as far as kind of giving them some advice or counsel about how to start a coffee business, and maybe some things they should avoid and some things they should do as they're figuring stuff out. So how can I kind of put all this stuff together? And during COVID, I bought a small Gießen from a company in Cape Town that wasn't using it, and it sat in our garage for about 2 years in a crate to Elkie, my wife's dismay, because it was taking up a lot of space. But then I was kind of throwing these ideas around, kind of conceptualizing what was going to happen, and then it came down to, okay, where am I going to put it? And it doesn't really it what I was thinking, at least at first, didn't really pencil to rent my own space because I didn't know how it was going to go, and I knew it was going to be super small scale. And then Chris from Coffee Cycle was opening up the OB space and offered a little kind of corner in his space to sublease. And that was really a perfect opportunity for me to pull the trigger and see what's going to go, see how this is going to go. So that's where I am now.
Well, and it's a little bit full circle because I think Chris worked for you for like 7 years
He did.
at Bird Rock
He did.
before going off on his own to do Coffee Cycle.
Yeah.
And then I worked for Chris for a
Right.
year when he opened his cafe. So there's this kind of weird connection here. One of the things with Chuck's Roast, obviously you went, on the nose. It's my coffee. I'm roasting it. Let's call it Chuck's Roast.
Well, that was a bit of a problem because, I mean, part of it is marketing myself and my expertise and the ability to source coffee and roast coffee. But, it's funny. When I was trying to think of a name for the company, all the cool names are now taken. It's totally different than it was 20 years ago. And I was asking, I know a couple of great, and a tube amp maker in town. And I was saying, hey, are there any cool names of old amps or vacuum tubes I can use? And the ones he presented me were actually already taken by other coffee companies and guitar maker, kind of the same thing. And so it came down to Chuck's Roast, and it came really from a joke with my friends trying to come up with a name. Ground Chuck was in the running for a while. And the great thing about Chuck's Roast is not the great thing, but the thing I didn't really think about it is how hard it is to now do a search for Chuck's Roast, and you get a bunch of Chuck Roast recipes. It doesn't actually. Sure. So I didn't really think that totally through all the way. But yes, that's what I'm stuck with now. It's Chuck's Roast.
But over time, it'll grow. I wrote this down. I just want to make sure that I get it right. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about what you're doing now is you acknowledge you're kind of looking beyond just the baseline of specialty coffee, I think. It's specialty coffee, what we describe as it, or the quality level of it, say 83 plus points, if you care about that sort of thing, is pretty ubiquitous. You can go to almost any town in America and get a pretty damn good cup of coffee, excuse my language. What I've noticed with some of the offerings that you've been putting out and some of the way you've been presenting it is something special and unique. How do you go about sourcing something that's the next thing beyond what people have been drinking now for, say, 10 years?
Well, that opens up a lot of questions as far as how much of that is out there. And there's been this kind of side discussion that specialty coffee is over and there's no more real good coffee. And I think there is you could make an argument that a lot of the top people aren't really selling exceptional coffee. They're just selling good coffee. So it's definitely not easy. And this is one of the things that's going to be difficult, obviously, going forward, is because a lot of times I may only offer one or two coffees on my offering sheet. And I think what I would like to do is just offer coffees that, I said on the site, just coffees that I like. And that kind of eliminates a lot of coffees out there. Or I really like, I guess I should say. And so to go about sourcing those coffees, it takes a lot of work, a lot of getting samples in, and not really worried about the price of the coffee. And hopefully the consumers that are going to buy coffee from me aren't so much worried about that, because a lot of them are going to be on the spendier side. But for now, it's kind of leveraging a lot of the contacts we had at Bird Rock, as far as the brokers and the importers, and going through some of their offering sheets. Of course, Cup of Excellence. Looking forward to doing that this year. I'm not going to be doing as many sourcing trips as I did, and it doesn't really pencil with the small scale that I'm doing. But I probably will go to at least Panama this year, probably March, and maybe one other Central American country.
Not to get too personal, and you can tell me, I'm not answering that. You're on your own. Does the finances of this whole operation, how important is that over the coffee, getting these coffees out to people? Because when I think about, say, if I were talking to somebody who was looking to start a coffee company, and they, when we talk about coffee companies serving just good coffee, maybe not great coffee, part of that is because there's a mass audience, there's a level you have to get at, so you're making enough money to stay in business.
Right.
Is that something you're factoring in here, or is this more about no, this is important to me. That'll come. I want this type of coffee to be in the marketplace.
Well, I think that'll come. I do think, and I can't, like, I think it's a mistake for a lot of younger coffee retailers, unless you have a retail location to offer a wide range of coffee, number one. So if I look at someone's, like, if you're imagining, okay, who the hip people are in the country that are considered, the best coffee people, and a lot of them have 10 or 15 options on that. And I think if you eliminate the 8 of those, you're probably going to be left with a couple really exceptional coffees. And that's really what I'm going for. As far as the finances, I would be first to say that this is the 4th month that Chuck's Roast has actually officially been in business. And if we were renting a place, it would not be sustainable at this point. There's no way. And, I owe Chris, a lot of that. It's just subleasing space and not having utilities, and a lot of the extra costs that are associated with renting a space allows me to kind of get to the point where maybe the brand is known and the coffees are becoming known before I get to that next phase. Now, obviously, there'll come a day when Chris needs the space that I'm in, as they're growing that roasting operation, or they're going to have to roast every day. And right now, it's working out really well because they aren't roasting every day, and I'm roasting on the days that they aren't roasting. So I know that there's an end point when he's going to say, Chuck, it's time for you to move on. And I'm hoping by that point that I have, and it's basically this whole situation has given me time to kind of see if I can get to that point where if I'm just offering a small handful of coffees, is that going to be sustainable? Is this going to be penciling? And I like the direction we're going. I certainly like some of the successes I've seen so far, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
As somebody who drinks a lot of coffee from a lot of different places, in part because of my work and in part because of what I just enjoy going to new places. I think you do have you hit the nail on the head saying there's only so many excellent coffees being offered.
Mm-hmm.
In part because I can count, as it's the beginning of 2025 and I've been reflecting a little bit on 2024. I think on one hand, I can count the number of coffees I drank last year that made me stop and go, oh,
Right.
that's exciting. So when you're out there, looking for those coffees, or when you're sourcing and trying to do that, what else is coming into play there? I ask a little bit because I'm thinking about sustainability and about our changing coffee culture and climate. Are you able to find those excellent coffees and then also meet all the other factors or other criteria that you might have personally putting into it?
Well, that's a good question. And again, well, to kind of take apart a couple things that you said, as far as thinking back on having a couple coffees in 2024 that you really made you stop. And that would be the goal of my entire offering sheet. So any coffee that someone gets from Chuck's Roast would have that effect on someone. Now, the flip side of that is everybody has different tastes and different appreciation of coffee. And so sometimes when I'm sourcing coffee, I'm definitely thinking of it from my perspective. So I chose to kick this company off with that Yemen coffee because Yemen coffee had a huge impact on me when I was starting my coffee journey as far as the wildness of it. Now, not everyone digs Yemeni coffee because it is super particular and super interesting. But so that was really coming from my head and my space. Hey, I want to do this. This is important to me. Maybe someone else will dig it. Now, I have a couple Kenyans, which I'm selling now that I know right when I tasted them, okay, people are going to dig this. So I'm going to buy these coffees. Now, I have a Colombian coffee that's incoming. And again, it was a very personal move. It's a solid, great cup. But again, it's coming from a place that, okay, this cup reminds me of sourcing in Colombia. And this is what I always liked about Colombian coffees is wrapped up in this cup. Now, again, it's going to be kind of like the Yemen. Will other people get that same vibe? But I'm really sourcing coffee from kind of a personal perspective a lot of the time. And now when it comes to sustainability and climate issues, if I'm not actually doing the sourcing on my own, obviously I'm dependent on, okay, who's bringing this coffee in? And the people I'm using have that same ethos. Like Cafe Imports, I use for that Yemen, and of course they have a long history of being sustainable and doing things at the farm level. Of course, I've used Red Fox and Aleco. Also I trust what they're doing and know that they do good work as well. So I'm kind of reliant on those people.
I don't know if you can see it, but I don't think you can, but I actually have a Red Fox burlap sack behind me, behind this little stand
Oh,
here,
right
kind of
on.
blocking
Super.
the view of the closet behind me. I saw a article about your new venture in Daily Coffee News that referred to you as a legend. When you look in the mirror, do you think to yourself, I am legend Chuck Patton going to work today? Like, how does
Well,
that make you feel?
I try and remind my wife all the time when I get in trouble. Hey, look, I'm a legend. It says right there in front. I'm allowed some mistakes every now and then. No, of course not. But yeah, that was a pretty nice compliment. But well, I mean, I do. There is, I guess, a certain amount of ego involved. I mean, I am proud of what we accomplished with Bird Rock. I think we were able to do some things that hadn't been done in San Diego, and maybe some things that had not been done by a lot of other roasters anywhere. There were times, and I was reflecting last night, looking forward to this interview, and I was kind of reflecting about, there were definitely times in when I was running Bird Rock when I knew for a fact that we had the best, say, offering sheet than anyone else in the country right now. Not all the time, of course, but maybe there was a month in a year where I know there was no way there wasn't. I don't care, Stump Down, Intelligentsia, any of those guys. I know our coffee's better, and so there was a certain amount of ego, and there was definitely an amount of pride um, in running that. Now, like I said earlier, as far as calling the company Chuck's Roast, part of what I'm selling is the past success and expertise. Going as far as legend, I don't know about that, but I do have to kind of rely on the fact that I've accomplished X, Y, and Z, and that's kind of what I'm building on for this new venture.
Sure. Well, not for nothing. Somebody once told me that I was possibly the best restaurant manager they ever had right before they fired me. So you never really know. If you're up, you might be up one day and you might be down the next. So, you just never really know.
Totally.
You obviously have extensive roasting experience, and with what you were doing at home, and then Bird Rock, and now with your new venture where you're kind of exploring some really cool coffees. If a young roaster came to you and just asked, what advice would you give them? And said, hey, if I could get any piece of advice from you, what would you say? And I'm saying specifically like someone who wants to be actively roasting the coffee.
Yeah, I would say don't use roasting software. I think it's a mistake to learn and start out using roasting software. And the reason I say that is because I think what happens if you're learning how to roast and you're using software at the same time, like Cropster, for example, or Artisan, I think what happens is you become sucked into this graph and then at the same time you're listening to these experts in the field, and there are some great people in the field talking a lot, but a lot of the message that they're presenting young roasters is you must be absolutely consistent. You have to stick with this roast curve. If you wait more than 6 minutes between your roast, then you're not going to have the consistency. And I think that's bullshit. I think roasting should be approached, especially early on, more like cooking. And sure, you have a recipe here, but you should be a little bit flexible with it and maybe try some things out. And I think going down that roast curve and the software kind of stifles creativity in a lot of ways, because you're looking at this roast curve and say, oh my God, I'm almost spent 8 minutes, 15 seconds in this drying phase. I got to hurry this up. Well, maybe not. Maybe the coffee's going to be better this time if you just let it go. And I think a lot of times when I'm seeing younger roasters roast, they're not even looking at the beans. They're not smelling the beans. They're not taking the dryer out at all sometimes during the roast. And I think that's a huge mistake. Now, once you learn how to roast in an analog fashion, when you're looking at the beans, when you're experimenting more, then I think roasting software is very important. And I think it can help you not only with consistency, but I think it can help you identify maybe where you went wrong with a particular roast. But I do think it's a mistake to go down this software and even this very rigid approach. Of course, it's science based, and of course, you have Maillard reactions, and of course, you're dealing with moisture, evaporation, and you're dealing with airflow, and all that, of course. But my point is that if you're not paying attention to the actual bean, I think you're missing out on your potential as a roaster. Now, we started when we were roasting. We didn't use software from the time we opened, and even before the time we opened Bird Rock, all the way until we got our Loring roaster in 2014. So we got Roaster of the Year. We got all kinds of high scores on Coffee Review without using any roasting software. We kept manual logs of rate of rise and power adjustments, but that was about it. And so I don't subscribe to the belief that I think a lot of young roasters are getting into, where they have to have roasting software, they have to have X percentage in development, or have to have X percentage of their roast in drying. I think part of it is all about experimentation. And even the other thing I would tell a young roaster is, even when you think you've dialed in a profile, okay, stick with that profile for a month. And if you still have the coffee, start over, because maybe you've learned something in that month, and maybe the coffee's changed a little bit. And I just did this with one of our coffees. I was doing a roasting class, and I decided to use a coffee that I've had, one of the Ethiopian one, and I decided to do three different with the student to do three different completely profiles on it. And one of the profiles I'm going to switch to going forward, because it's actually better than the profile I've been using for the last 2 months. And so I think there is also that belief with young roasters that once they dial something in, they can't change from it. When in reality, like I said, it should be more of get your feeling, get a feel for what the bean is doing, get it loosen up a little bit, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think the software and again, a lot of the advice that they're getting is don't be loose, be rigid, be exact. And
I think rigid is the word that I was running through my head. Rigidity.
yeah,
It's a little bit of a get off my lawn moment for me, because I think have been teaching people, younger people in particular, whether it's in careers or in schools, that this is the path. This is the way you do
yeah,
things. Here's resources to help you do them exactly this way.
yes.
But they never quite learn what to do if things go off the path.
Well, that's
They
just it. What if the software goes down?
right, like they did.
Yeah,
And thinking creatively or problem solving are things that, we've in our American kind of ideal of getting things perfect or exact or excellence.
right,
We've set a standard. This is what that is, and this is how you get there. And all of a
right.
sudden, if you start falling off that path, I think those are the best things. This is why my wife, I do most of our cooking, and she hates it, because whenever I make something she likes, she goes, "Oh, well, can you make this again?" I'm like, "Well, sure, but I got no idea how I got
It's
here."
going to be
Like,
different.
it's
Yeah, but you're consistently good, right? You're consistently good. You might not have a consistent product, but
sure,
you have a consistently.
yeah. I
I mean, the
I
product might not
know.
be the same, but it's a consistently good product. And that was, I remember getting a complaint like that, because we'd always change our espresso blend, because I was trying to be more seasonal. And the customer said, "Well, how are you going to maintain consistency when?" And well, it's consistently good. And that's just like how I approach roasting. I mean, it's obviously when you nail a roast, and especially if you get, let's say, a coffee review score, you want then to be exactly, you want people to experience exactly what the coffee review scored on that coffee. So you follow that exact profile, and that's a very specific event. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's kind of how I'm trying to teach roasting is with that in mind. Okay, it's going to be analog. You're going to look at the bean. You're going to smell the bean. What are the differences between that? Because I want people to roast with confidence and the ability that they can do it without using any software. And when you remove that software part, then they kind of get more creative, and then they're looser. And I think the coffee will benefit from it in the long run.
I have no plans of ever being a roaster myself, but I'm feeling very inspired right now, Chuck.
Okay.
What comes next for Chuck's Roast? What for next for you as a consultant? What do you see the future path being for you?
Well, I think, like I said, building the brand, making it a sustainable brand. And like I said, I mean, there will come a day that Chris will say, "Hey, bud, time to move out." And so I was kind of thinking about that. What I really would like to do is have the training be a bigger part of the business, and to have a space where I can do that on a more regular basis. And what I'm kind of toying with is to have a space that I could offer a little bit of retail in the morning. I never want to get back in the espresso game, but in theory, it would be with. Have you heard of the ground control units? You know, those brewers.
Mhm.
So we hosted one of their first prototypes at Little Italy, and so we worked with those guys before that came to market. And I was always fascinated with it. I thought it was such a great tool, and I really believe the way Eli and that group have designed it, that you can run a coffee retail location without an espresso machine and just use that. And that's what I want to do. If I ever found a really small location to have a little bit of retail, but just use the ground control, so just offering brewed coffee, and it also brews a concentrate, and so you have a little bit more flexibility there than say a Curtis brewer, and to offer really perfectly brewed coffee, and as a way to sell coffee beans, in the morning, and then run some classes and consulting in the afternoon. That would be ideal. So yeah, I guess that would be the long range plan
The long
of,
game.
of Chuck's Roast.
I don't know if you got this message I sent kind of late, but something new that we've been doing on the show is just asking people about the things that are important to them and if they have any sort of charitable or nonprofit efforts that they care about or that they support. And if so,
Yeah,
we want to share it on the show.
I haven't really thought about that, but I have always had a soft spot for Grounds for Health, and we aren't to the point where we can do a lot of charitable work right now, or Chuck's Roast isn't. I can say I'm not to the point, but that was a company or an organization that we always love to support, and hopefully we'll get to support that again as we grow a little bit.
We'll definitely share that in our podcast show notes and everywhere that the show comes out. When you're out exploring, maybe not an origin trip, maybe you're just running up the coast somewhere and you pop into a new place. What are you going to order?
I always just order brewed coffee, and I think you can tell a lot about a place and how they present that to you, and you get a feel for how they're roasting, or how their roaster is roasting. I very rarely get an espresso or a cortado or straight. I always gravitate towards, okay, how's the brewed coffee, and so that's 99% of the time. That's what I do.
Did I miss anything today that you wanted to share?
No, I think we're good. I want to thank you so much for giving the opportunity to come on here and talk a little bit
Hey, I'm the
about
one
what I'm
talking
trying
to a
to
legend, sir.
do.
And it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you being here. To everyone
Oh,
else listening, you'll find all the links that we chatted about in today's episode, including the one to chuckroastscoffee.com. That's also the Instagram at Chuck Roast Coffee.
yeah, and that's kind of a mouthful, chucksroastcoffee.com. But it's actually, so we have a workaround of that is chucks-roast.com. That's a little easier, and it links to that same.
We'll make sure people can find it. It's in our show notes. It's in our newsletter. This show is part of our Roast West Coast Coffee Network and can be found on all the favorite podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify. Just search for Coffee People, and shout out to our presenting sponsor, Roastar Incorporated. We appreciate their efforts, and they're a coffee packaging company helping small businesses tell their big story. That's all for today. Anything to say?
No, I think we're all good. Thank you so much, Ryan.
All right, we're
Appreciate
out.
it.
Thank you everyone for listening to the stories of Coffee People. Tip your baristas and be sure to drink good coffee.
Right on.
That's it.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, you're welcome. Call in and say hello. You're more than welcome here.
Right on.
Certainly appreciate that. I already hit the recording thing, and I saw your email, and I mean, we talked about so much stuff last time. I didn't want to run out of time, but you, in addition to like making good coffee, you teach people, and I was
Well,
hoping
that
you,
was kind of the
yeah,
thing I was.
share that.
Excuse me. That was the thing I was thinking about after I talked to you, because we were talking a lot about feasibility of just offering a couple awesome coffees rather than a line of 10 coffees, and
Yeah,
maybe those are awesome. And it is maybe a on the surface, it may seem like a difficult thing to pencil out, but the other part of this business is the education part, and that's really what got me kind of back into coffee was the hope, to teach people about coffee, to continue on with the coffee cuppings that I did at Bird Rock Coffee, and
Hmm.
to do that again, to teach people how to roast coffee, and then business consulting. That's a big kind of a big part of the business. And Chuck's Roast is really the coffee line, but Patton Coffee Consulting is the education part of it. And that's really kind of what I wanted to say, I guess, how important that part is to me, because I've been a teacher for so long. I think this would be a great opportunity to continue to teach and do it in a way that would kind of help people grow as coffee people, either on the
I
roasting side or on the business side or as the employee side, or even the hobbyists too. I mean, a lot of
mhm.
people who come into to the cuppings are usually just people that want to learn about coffee. They like coffee and they want to learn more about it. Whereas the coffee roasting classes are usually, maybe sometimes it's been a home roaster, and other times it's been someone who's just starting a coffee business, and so that's a great opportunity.
I saw a photo of a recent class that you were offering at the shop there. I know you have all this experience, and obviously you teach on the in your other life.
Yeah.
But did you get nervous, kind of getting back into it, where you're telling people your coffee information and going, "Hey, I know this, I've done it, but I'm doing it
Well,
again for the first time."
that was a great question. I forgot, because I kind of had a shtick, because from basically 2007 to 2016, every Friday I would host cuppings for the general public at the original Bird Rock location. And so I different coffees every week, but the same kind of shtick as far as how coffees are processed, how coffees are grown. And I think it was one of the first times I did a cupping after not doing it in in public for so many years. I forgot how to explain the wash process, and I was stumbling over, and I had totally just like I couldn't explain to the guests properly what washed processed coffee is, and that's really the most basic thing you should know if you're going to do a coffee cupping. So yeah, definitely had some stumbles early on, but it was then it's just kind of like muscle memory. Once you get going, it's pretty easy again.
If
Now I never taught people how to roast coffee before, so that's a brand new lesson plan. And what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is not teach roasting on a home roaster, but to do it on the Gießen. So they actually have some experience roasting coffee on an actual commercial roaster.
So the
And
customer for that, then, just to clarify, maybe somebody who's already tried a little bit of home roasting on a 1 pound
right,
roaster, or some, small roaster, they're looking to see, could I take the next step? That's the
yes,
person for that
absolutely
class.
right. And that's pretty much
Yeah.
everyone who's taken the class before. And I have one person who's been in the business for a while, just needs to refine kind of what they're doing. And I gave him some tips over the phone, and he's going to come down and take a lesson, and
Hmm.
we'll kind of work on some refining with his style of roast. But as far as approaching those roasting classes, as I was talking about earlier, I don't think young roasters should rely on software. And when I teach a roasting class, it's all analog, and I'm having them really write down temperature tracking, and they're not relying on the software basically at all until they do a couple roasts, and then I can kind of teach them how software works and how software can help you with consistency and stuff. But I do think it's crucial, as I was saying earlier, when you're teaching someone or when someone's just starting out, to kind of do it the analog way at first,
So that
and then
means
for
I
the
have
business.
to ask
Right.
about. No, that's okay. I have to ask then. There was an article that I saw recently. This is over the pond, where a roaster developed an entire profile and roast using only Chat GPT AI prompts, but
Uh-huh.
didn't tell anyone that's where it came from, and put it out as one of their own coffees next to their other coffees.
I bet it was great. What do you say? What do you
I
say
mean,
about the cup quality?
they're saying that it's one of their most popular coffees at this point, that they went through the process. How do
You
we
see,
move into this new world
that,
where we can do that?
well. Wait a minute. Now a couple things. Now GT is a little different, because it's kind of going back to that methodology of how people are. I'm sure it's science based. How method. What happens, the
Mhm.
chemical reactions when you should do it. But my point is that what you actually said in the last in our last chat was the rigidity of how people are supposed to roast now, and that's a great demonstration of you can maybe do it a different way and still come up with a different result. And, and be open to new things and mistakes even, and that could lead to some great coffee. So I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
No, Rose, just curious about your feeling about it. You're talking about analog and writing things down on a piece of
Yeah,
paper.
and that's the
For
opposite way.
Yeah, for our younger audience, paper is like this thing that comes from like trees that get cut up and mashed, and then they dry it. And you can use charcoal to write on it. It's cool.
Right.
Look into it. But it's just a totally different, model. There's going to be a generation a few years from now coming up that's how they'll get started. That's how they'll
Yeah,
learn the basics. And so,
I do, and I'll go back to the cooking analogy too. I mean, you have a recipe for anything you're going to cook, and it's just about. I think what we're kind of losing is that feel, is that kind of sensory feel, that just trusting your intuition, and when you're kind of feeling, okay, I think I should make an adjustment here. I mean, that's okay to do that. It doesn't have to wait for a sign and a signal to tell you to do it. Once you've roasted several coffees, it's just like cooking a dish for a while. The temperature might be different. So whatever protein you're cooking might, work differently, or something might be different. Just be open to that and go with it. And what do you feel about it? Trying to get people to that state where I guess what it is getting to the point where you're confident enough to trust how you're feeling about a roast, and not depending on what something is telling you to do at a particular time.
Sure. Anything else that we missed when we talked last time?
Well, I think the other one little thing I wanted to bring up was, as far as the coffees, I do have a couple coffees I'm kind of excited about right now. We have a couple from Kenya, one called the Kenya Key, which is the mill name, and then another one, Rungetto. And they're very, very different Kenyan coffees. Coffee Review just gave the Key a 94, and that'll probably be published next week. But the Key is kind of real peachy. It's one of my favorite Kenyans of all time. It's just a little bit more delicate than a traditional Kenyan, but the Rungetto is more of a traditional Kenyan. It's really heavy-bodied, dense, thick, black currant, and the Key is more peach, kind of tropical. So it's kind of a nice pairing. I'm kind of happy with those two Kenyas that I'm offering right now. And we have a wonderful Colombia coming in next week that I'm really excited about. And then later in the month, we have early next month, we have a washed coffee, a washed geisha from Peru that's coming in that should be outstanding. So those are the things I'm kind of excited about as far as our offering sheet at the moment.
We'll make sure that we share those with everyone. I brewed a coffee in an automated machine at the car dealership this morning, and I bet every one of those is going to be a lot better than the one that I dumped in the grass outside the car dealership.
Did you buy a new car?
I did not. No. But I am deciding whether or not I'm going to spend a bunch of money to do all the things that they want me to do in the service department. So
got it. Yeah, that's always fun.
Chuck, well, thanks for popping back in. And, I'm glad we were able to clarify that for people.